Welcome back to the Elisha's Riddle podcast, a prophetic conversation unraveling the riddle of Christ in all things. Nick Padavani, how you doing?
Oh man, it's been quite a week over here at the Almond Branch. We're grateful, me and Mike, right now that we're able to have this conversation because we have had internet issues all week. We had our IT guy here twice and hasn't totally been resolved yet, but obviously it's resolved enough that we're having this conversation, which is great. But as of the day we're recording this, there's this news today of this massive IT outage affecting businesses all over the world, and I find that very, very interesting. But I'm glad that we're on a Mac right now. Apparently, it's Windows that's getting affected, so we're doing okay. So glad to be with you today, man.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned cyber attacks. I know you mentioned it. How long ago? Maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago.
Well, yeah, beginning of the year. It was really the beginning. It was really like we're going on 7 months now, and it is interesting because, well, this week it's the reason we're having issues at our church is because there was a storm that went through and there was a power surge and it blew out our modem. And so literally just took out our modem and some other equipment, we think. So Mike, who's backstage here, has been working hard on that for the past few days. And so, yeah, it's crazy, though, because I am finally, and this is something I wanted to announce to our listeners, our subscribers, we're finally getting the advance videos done, the final part of the Awake, Arise, Advance series. And I'm putting the final touches on the editing. They're actually all done. I'm in the process now of uploading them. But as I'm, getting to the end of the race on this, because I had this word last year, I don't know if I shared this on the podcast. I know I shared this at the Almond Branch on a Sunday, but I woke up from a nap one day and I heard the words, "Get the videos done by August 1st." So random. I just woke up with that. I wasn't thinking about Awake, Arise, Advance. I don't know what I was thinking, but it just hit me out of the blue. And so that's been a goal. We got the Arise videos done. We did a whole small group thing with our church, went through the Arise series, and that was kind of motivation to get the videos uploaded. So I've been working on Advance pretty nonstop for the last 3 weeks, and I'm just at the end now. Yeah, and then we have all these internet issues this week. And now, as I'm really wrapping it up today, globally there's these internet issues going on, and yeah, people are comparing it to like Y2K as if Y2K really happened. So, yeah.
That's crazy, man. It's crazy what's happening in the world. I'm glad you're getting those videos done. Those are very important. I believe in those videos, and I believe in Awake, Arise, Advance.
Yeah.
So good job getting them done by August 1st.
Yeah, Lord willing, we're just about there. So yeah, we'll be sharing a lot more about that. But yeah, for those following us, we've been really tracking with this word about God birthing something this year, but in the midst of shaking. And there really was this word about cyber attacks and things. Now they're ruling out a cyber attack today. Windows is saying, or the third party is saying that, it's really just a software update issue, something like that. Something very simple that's now grounding airplanes and causing the stock market to go on pause and all these things happening.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
but yeah, no, we
Conspiracy Dylan has a hard time believing that, but
I
have to say, like, we have if we have a software update on a Sunday morning,
yeah,
we can't live stream.
That's true.
Or the live stream comes out kooky. So it does happen.
These software updates are the real deal. They have affected our entire Sunday live stream. So yeah, we Windows got to work on that.
This is like a worldwide software update that shut down.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
Right.
It's something along those lines. Obviously, a lot more technical than that, but I wanted to say here right off the bat that like the word that we gave at the beginning of the year was about something being birthed in the church, a rising, triumphant church that's coming forth. And I believe a lot of that is meant to happen through the airwaves and through the internet, that God wants to release his glory, through telecommunications and online. And that's been building since COVID and, 2020, and a lot of amazing stuff that was happening through Zoom. So I believe that there is an attack on it's like the dragon opening its mouth at the birth of the baby in Revelation, that something's about to get birthed. And as that birthing is coming forth, there's always this intensity, and you can call it labor pains, but there's always this resistance. And so I think, what we're experiencing this week might be a little bit of a foretaste of something that's going to accelerate as we get into the rest of the year. Well, but it's because the glory is manifesting online and, of course, in our churches and fellowship in person.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth, I feel like these days coming across the internet. There's a lot of believers releasing truth, a lot of creativity, pointing to the glory of God. You got exposures, like Hollywood exposures. You got the Cat Williams interview, just one semi-funny example, but there's a lot of truth coming across the internet, and it makes sense that the devil is not wanting that. So just let's have Marty over in Windows IT in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Click the software update.
I thought you just read my mind for a minute, because I was about to bring up Martin Luther in the Reformation with his technology. I thought, let's have Marty back. And but for real, the connection there, like when the printing press was this wild technology that changed the world, and there's a lot of horrible, deceptive books out there, but there's a lot of truth that has come out on the written page. So there's a lot of conspiracy, a lot of crap on the internet. There's a lot of lies and weird stuff, but yet the truth has an avenue now to go out faster than ever before. And that is significant. And it's like we're reaching maximum capacity now, where the internet is in this place of maturity in terms of the ability to really communicate ideas quickly and clearly. So we're at the new Reformation. It's happening, man.
Yeah, and you also gave a prophetic word that the internet turned 30. What year was that?
Yeah, that was 2009, right before COVID. Yeah,
2019. The internet
right
turned
before
30.
COVID, and we talked about the 30-year maturity word, that the internet was coming into its destiny, and it was really forged in order to connect nations around the gospel of Jesus. Yeah, and then COVID hit right after that. That was so interesting. Yeah. So,
I remember having a conversation with John Crowder about the printing press in like 2011.
Wow.
He was just like, the internet is like the modern day printing press. And like, just for such a time as this, the printing press was created, and then boom, everyone was able to get their own Bibles in their hands for the first time ever.
It's radical.
Right at the time that, as like Martin Luther was rising up and saying, like, the Catholic Church is just not meeting the needs of the people. Like, people need to be able to experience God directly. And then the printing press is invented, and it was just this perfect storm, this perfect collision of this technology, the printing press, and this truth of the gospel.
Yeah.
And 100%, I believe it's happening again in our day with the internet and the truth of the gospel. There's an explosion that's beginning to happen, and it's been happening, but it's happening like never before. And the dragon is mad. The nations are raging. But he who sits in the heavens laughs.
He's trying to devour the baby of what God is birthing. And man, that might be a good segue into like the craziness of this past weekend.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about more shakings that are unfolding in 2024, because it wasn't just about cyber issues. It was about other things happening politically.
There was an assassination attempt on the former president, right?
Yes. So
that just happened this week as of our recording.
Yes. So I wanted to share a story about that, because I was in Pennsylvania the day that the shooting happened in Pennsylvania. I was on the eastern side. This happened more towards Pittsburgh on the west. But this goes right in line with everything we're talking about. So I had an incredible conversation with one of the writers for Elisha's Riddle, and a dear friend, a member of the Almond Branch, our friend Barry Karazowitz. I was at his house. He lives in Pennsylvania. Barry and his awesome wife, Jeanette, travel almost every Sunday over an hour to come to the Almond Branch to join us and bless us with their presence. And Barry has written a number of amazing articles for Elisha's Riddle. I know you've talked to Barry before, right, Dylan?
Yeah, Barry's the man.
Yeah.
We're really pro Barry on this podcast.
Yes, he takes on a wild train ride when he gives his thoughts and gives words that he feels from the Lord. And so
he's psychedelic, man. He's far out.
So yeah, he's a good friend. And if you're listening, Barry, love you, man. So we were having dinner. Kelly and I took the girls over the Delaware River and literally driving over into Pennsylvania, as we have to do in New Jersey, and went to have dinner with them. And on Saturday, July 8th, I think was it July 8th or no, it was
13th.
The 13th. Yes. So 13th, we're there and we're talking. Barry and I are having a conversation about just the times that we're in. And he brings up the 1960s and just this sense that he's like, I feel like we're at a 1968 moment in particularly. And he was going over some things that happened in 68. But of course, there was a build up to that season, politically, socially, culturally. It was just the world was changing in dramatic ways. And there was almost like another kind of reformation was going on in the 60s. And we talked about the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr.'s father, and other, there were other assassinations, of course, that happened in the 60s. It's just wild time, riots, civil unrest.
I thought Bobby was in a plane accident, or was that JFK? Or am I mixing that up?
Yeah, I don't know who you're referring. I know
John Jr.
Is it John Jr. is in a plane?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
His cousin.
Okay.
Okay.
So both his uncle and his dad were both killed?
Yes. JFK, the president, was killed in 62, and then RFK was killed later on in the 60s. Later in the 60s, so 67, 68, I think.
Okay.
Barry's probably going to comment in the below.
Yeah, we'll get Barry to fact check this. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But a lot was going on.
A lot was going on. So we're talking about this, and, we're particularly talking about these assassinations. And I just begin to say, look, Barry, like I'm, I don't know, I was preaching to the choir because he's totally in agreement with me on this. Like the beautiful thing that happened out of all of that, which many people are aware of now because of a movie that came out recently with Jonathan Rumi, Jesus Revolution. The beautiful thing that began to shift was something out of California that swept the nation, where there was a huge awakening spiritually to Jesus. And there was a new Bible translation going out in the land, the Living Bible. There was new expressions of church happening, and there was a lot of reformation going on throughout the body of Christ. And there was a small sector of churches who were embracing, the hippie movement, and people who were totally disconnecting from society, totally, just fed up with where the world was and the government, the military industrial complex. We're hearing that a lot these days when people talk about, Russia and the Ukraine. And a lot of these conversations are coming up again, similar to what was happening with Vietnam, and people being very upset over decisions being made. But out of all of that unrest, there were people searching for truth, and a lot were going into Eastern mysticism, meditation, and just breaking free from the what they felt were the shackles of religious conservatism, and all this stuff, and yet being unsatisfied. And man, just so many issues that they were trying to find in drugs and acid, LSD, all these things, and a lot of people were losing their lives and coming under the throes of addiction. And so in the middle of all of this was this what's now termed a Jesus revolution, where it was significant revival, like masses of people coming to Jesus in a real way, in a transformative way. And it kind of sparked in California, Southern California, and just went all over the place. And so we're talking about this. And I just said, you know what? 2024 is a crescendo year, very similar. Just agreeing with Barry about 1968, and in the middle of the unrest, and things like you had these assassination attempts and real assassinations. Like there is going to be a birthing of a new Jesus revolution. Like this is where it's headed.
Yeah.
So we're talking about that, man, and I don't know, maybe 5 minutes later, Barry just gets an alert on his phone, and he's like, oh my gosh, Trump was shot in the head. And all you knew at that point, in that first few minutes with the news that was going out, because you saw the picture of blood coming down his face.
Yeah.
there was a lot of confusion. Oh my goodness, man. And he was in Pennsylvania at a rally. So we're just checking the news. We're checking the new printing press of X, formerly known as Twitter, where you are getting instant news, like instant videos uploaded from people at the events. It's just wild the day that we're in. That's like the spread of information. You know, I'm not going to CNN or Fox News. I'm going to Twitter, to X, and I'm getting just all this direct information from people. It's another, that's a whole side note there, but there's a whole reformation of the news happening now with social media, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you want to jump in here, man, before I take it off, because I want to go into this 1960s stuff. But it was intense. It was an intense evening, and we're like, we just prayed. We prayed for him, for the people at the rally, not knowing what was going on, and then the pieces starting coming in within an hour or two. You had heard that the shooter was taken out, Trump was okay, and this crazy picture, this now an iconic picture that's going to go down in the history books of him rising and fist pumping in the air, telling the crowd that he was okay, that he was alive, as Secret Service is trying to get him out.
Yeah.
Man, dude, it was really intense that we were already having this conversation, and then we get that alert. And it was like, yeah, there are these shakings happening. The dragon is here trying to stop things through violence and murder and deceit and deception. And yet something is being birthed. There is a new Jesus revolution. And it's like, how much more obvious can it get? God has confirmed this conversation, this prophetic word, so much.
Yeah,
so
yes.
yeah,
and I'll just say one thing about the assassination attempt. It was crazy. I'm sure people have seen the video by now that he turned his head like right at the moment that the bullet would have hit him square. He would have died instantly.
Yeah.
And he just happened to turn his head like just slightly, so it just grazed his ear, which is crazy. Definitely it's hard not to see the hand of God in that.
Man, I know, for real. Like, it was what, and when he gave his speech at the Republican convention in Milwaukee, that's the first thing he acknowledged. He said, it's the amazing, I think he said amazing grace, or the, incredible grace of God. So, yeah, it's wild what's going on. We're living in crazy times.
Right.
But I feel excited. I feel like, like God is really doing something. And the enemy's trying to stop it, but he's going to fail.
Yeah. There's an awakening happen. Many, many, many people are coming to the truth. And we're just at the beginning of it. We're at the beginning of that. You're going to see a whole wave of millions and millions and millions of people come to Jesus.
Yeah.
Across the world. So let's glean a little bit from the 60s. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked about this a little bit before, that what happened with the hippies in particular, the way the church embraced that, certain parts of the church embraced them, other parts were, just stuck in this kind of, I don't know, just focused on all the negatives of the movement, and just kind of created a separation between them and this countercultural beatnik hippie thing that was going down. It was growing. Mm-hmm. But there were churches that extended an olive branch, and Chuck Smith and Calvary, and these churches that, and again, the Jesus Revolution movie picked up on some of it.
Yeah.
They were crossing
Southern California.
Yeah. They were, crossing the lines to welcome them. And it wasn't, they weren't trying to affirm every part of their lifestyle and the things that they were doing. They were just trying to show the love of Jesus to them. And, yeah, so I guess that would be good to talk about a little bit. Like, who are the hippies today? Like, what is, if we just want to glean a little bit from this, because God is saying, okay, let's get ready. Like, it's here, it's upon us. We're in labor right now. It's like birth. Come on, push one more time, bride of Christ. Like, let's push. Let's come through this season. Let's maintain our hope and our vision. We can't, obviously, we don't know the future. We don't want to try to, describe in every detail what's going to be happening, but I don't know, to glean a little bit, to encourage the body of Christ. I guess that would be a good question for us, is like, who are the hippies of today? Like, who is God wanting to bring an explosion of his glory amongst? because I want to be there. I don't want to be on the wrong side of history where there were, you know, these well-meaning Christians, you know, who saw the corruption of society and the hippies, you know, bringing all of this, you know, bad philosophical thinking into, you know, into the culture, but they completely rejected it and didn't want any part of it, and had a holier than thou, self-righteous, us versus them, you know, thing going on, where they just stayed in their churches doing their same routines and didn't adapt, didn't adjust to what God was doing in the culture at that time. So yeah, these are really good things to think about, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I just think people who are unchurched, people who are outsiders, people who, you know, I think LGBT, I think people who struggle with addiction.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole, I think people, like you said, people are really seeking truth right now.
Yeah.
And so I think it's wide open. I think that's why we're creating Awake Arise Advance, you know, is because we were trying to create a net, you know, to catch fish.
Yes.
And I think it needs to be a real loose net, you know.
Yes.
But a net nonetheless, you know, like we are trying to lead people to Jesus and teach people about Jesus.
Yeah.
But it has to be so organic and free flowing. It's hard to just get people to come, you know, to your church. I think that's an admirable goal, but I think there's just something about starting house churches and starting house groups. I think churches that embrace the group model have an opportunity.
Yeah.
I think people need to be brought into homes and shown the love of Jesus and hospitality.
Yeah.
And then the church doors. Yeah. There just needs to be a lot of grace.
Yeah.
And a lot of truth. You know, the two things that Jesus brought to the world, grace and truth.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. Those are just some of my thoughts. I think that
good, man.
Every, you know, like we always say at Elisha's riddle, like the riddle of Christ is hidden in every person.
Yeah.
And so this truth that like every person is called to awaken to Christ within, you know.
Yes.
I'm thinking like, it's like you said, it's hard to say what it's really going to look like in the future.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's not going to be, I think there'll be a few different ways to describe what's happening. And maybe some people will call it like a second Jesus revolution.
Mm-hmm.
I think an awakening is going to be, what the history books, you know, the church history books call it, is like an awakening, you know, maybe even a grace awakening, an awakening to the grace of God, an awakening to Christ, an awakening to inclusion, what Christ did for all of humanity. Like, I don't know, man. Those are just some of my thoughts. I mean, we could take it deeper, but what do you?
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate you, you know, bringing it back to Awake Arise Advance too, because I mean that idea of a net, creating a net that can adapt to all these different scenarios and cultures and people. Like, it's going to look different depending on who we're trying to reach. And you know, a net you can drop in all different kinds of waters, you know, salt water, fresh water, lakes, rivers, you know, oceans. So there's all different kinds of environments and places where we can gather with people and connect with them and do church, you know, but the net kind of remains the same. And the net is, you know, this, first of all, this way of Jesus where he made friends. He developed friendships and brought them around the table. I mean, you look at the Gospels and it's all Jesus at tables. It's, you know, he's at the temple, but he's only at the temple a few times to actually just like turn upside down their tables and kind of come against the religious political structures, you know, that were going down there. But he's spending most of his time around tables, campfires and other things. And so, that's a big part of Advance, is like equipping people to embrace this, you know, discipleship, which has become such a heavy term, but it's really meant to be something fun and refreshing and core to who we are.
Just like Jesus focused relationships.
Yeah.
Jesus focused loving relationships, teaching people how to walk with him, teaching people truth.
Yeah. So, you know, we're like at the Almond Branch, I can only speak to my own context. Like, you know, I'm I'm passionate about encouraging people to just go to where people are at. The goal is not to get them to come into church. If that happens, that's awesome, but like Jesus really, when he released his disciples, he told them his main thing he wanted to do was just to go and make new disciples, which had to do with them gathering around tables themselves and developing these friendships and sowing into people.
It wasn't about bringing them back to a certain location.
Yeah.
For Jesus, which it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't.
He brought church to them, and so that's part of the Arise curriculum, which is all about communion and gathering. Like, that's really important. We want to gather. That's absolutely vital. But really, the heart of the net goes back to Awake, which is the message of the mystery and all. And that's what I kind of wanted to get to, is that the reality of Christ, the glory of God. And we use the phrase original blessing a lot, teaching people about the original blessing before there was sin, before there was corruption and darkness and all of that. There was this beautiful blessing of God's Spirit and his imprint on humanity. And that blessing still resides, often hidden behind darkness and false identities and all of that. But that original blessing of God's image, his light, his face, is hidden inside every person. And to me, that is what this Reformation is all about. That's what the internet is going to release more in greater power, is getting the message of the mystery of Christ hidden in all things out into the world. And so, you brought up these different people groups before when I asked about who's going to be the hippies, like who's going to be the new hippies of today. I think of the spiritual children of the hippie movement, like the New Age movement of today that really got accelerated in the 60s and the whole Age of Aquarius thing. And there's so much interesting stuff surrounding that. But, people who are, they say they're done with organized religion because they've, seen the corruption, they've seen the dryness of it. They know there's something like more deeper out there, but they're not finding it in a lot of churches. That's not all rebellion. That's not all, people just wanting to reject God. There's genuine thirst, genuine hunger. And that to bring it back to the 60s, I think is what, the churches in Southern California tapped into. Like, we're not going to minimize Jesus by any means. We're going to exalt Jesus all the more, but we're not going to try to give them a religion and try to package them into what we know is cultural Christianity. We're going to give them the essence of the faith, which is Christ crucified, Christ's life, Christ's death and resurrection, and let the power of the Holy Spirit move in their life. And so, man, I think that's the number one thing we want to see. That's the net we want to throw out there. That's really the bait inside the net, right? That's really what, attracts. And so I think there's going to be lots of people who are part of what we'd call the New Age movement. A lot of people who, you mentioned the LGBT community. There's a lot of people groups like
Native Americans.
Oh yeah. The indigenous people of this land, like, have such a deep connection to the Spirit and to the essence that's underneath everything. And we don't need to go out condemning that or trying to Christianize that. Like, we just need to show that the light that formed all things has a name. And the name is a person who did become flesh, who was incarnated and became a man and died and rose again. And so, I think there's going to be a big awakening in these communities to the person of Jesus and to his death and resurrection, without throwing that part out because they're upset at Christianity or religion. They're going to find the gold within it. And I think it's going to bring new expressions of faith, where you'll have like a tribal community that they won't go to a church building with a steeple on it. They'll go to their powwows and their meetings, and they'll continue in the pursuit and honor of the Great Spirit, but they'll have that awakening to Christ in a deeper way. And you'll have people in the New Age community who will still do their drum circles, and they'll still gather, but those drum circles will turn into worship fests and parties celebrating the Spirit of God and giving praise to Jesus, but it might happen outdoors more than it happens in a church building. So this is just fun, kind of pondering ways it could go. I don't want to put a box on this, but I'm excited about these possibilities.
Yeah, me too. And amazing things are going to continue to happen in local churches too. Like we can say that. Like,
absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. It's happening. There's local churches that are experiencing the presence of God and connection and fellowship. We're experiencing that at the Almond Branch, man. Like, totally. And you tell me great things about home church, your congregation over there. Like, man, there is great stuff happening right within the walls of, churches that are open to the Spirit, though. Like churches that just, they want to keep going with the routine, and if they're not embracing that message of grace and union with Christ, I do think it's going to be tougher for them. I think it's going to be a drying up.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
But to your original point, like it just can't only be that. And people have been saying this for a long time, right? Like the church has to go beyond the four walls. The church, we are the church, like these kinds of things. But they have to become more than just sayings that a few people say. Like this is actually
with a little program attached to it. Like we're going to go beyond the four walls 4 times a year and serve in the inner city.
We need every believer to get a true revelation of that we are the church, and that we reach people everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And Christ in us is awakening Christ in them, in the outsider.
Yeah.
Because Christ is the mystery hidden in all things, hidden in all people. Colossians 1:27, 1:28. And it's our aim, just like the Apostle Paul, to awaken Christ within people everywhere.
Yeah.
And we're not putting law in front of them to do something in order to, but it's just going to be through pure love and faith and truth. And just receiving, like you said in one of your articles, like the Greek word for receiving is just to take what's already yours. And so there is this receiving, right? That people that don't know Jesus, they need to receive what's already been purchased for them.
Yeah.
And that's what God wants to do, through us. And the hippie, and I think the people that were successful in the 60s, like you said, they weren't putting all these obstacles. They were just inviting them in and preaching them the truth, and I think there was some people, like you said, there were some believers that wanted them to clean themselves up before coming to Jesus, and change their culture and change the way they dress and change, but people like what was his name? The guy
Chuck Smith.
Yeah, people like Chuck Smith, they recognize that the grace of God is for everybody, for all cultures.
Yeah, and they trusted the grace of God to change hearts on the inside, which is,
that's good.
That's tough too. But yeah, man, I just wanted to go back to something else, like another confirmation God's given us. We've been having this like almost year-long conversation about this birthing. And there's been so many signs and confirmations about it. The whole earthquake thing that happened, for people that have been following on the podcast here. But one of it was the Boston Celtics championship, which wasn't that long ago, where you and I were talking about what happened to us in Boston and some of the connections to the Celtic movement, the Celtic Christianity. But that was another amazing thing. If anybody's listening to this, go back to the Boston Celtic episode and listen to that conversation, because that was so much fun. But the way that St. Patrick went about going to the lost and incarnating himself into society. And he wasn't forcing these barbarians, that others would call them. He wasn't forcing them into a certain system or into church buildings. He literally just started church amongst their culture, but brought Christ at the center of it. So that's another picture, St. Patrick gives another sign of like where we're headed.
Yeah.
So,
and it does raise questions of like, because I can hear people saying like, okay, like that sounds nice, but how do you do that? And again, I think that's where Awake and Rise Advance is like our little offering to the world of like, this is the way we think you can do it, is taking communion and just gathering and teaching people, these basic 7-facet parts of the gospel, these basic truths of the gospel.
Yeah.
And so maybe we'll do an episode talking about that, soon. Just like
we'll get the word out. We'll get the word out as that comes out. The Awake Arise Advance stuff. Yeah.
Just like we could have a conversation, just like the case for Awake Arise Advance. Like,
That's good. That's good. Cool, man. All right. Well, I think that's good for now. I think we laid out a lot of just what's been happening. But Saturday was just really intense. But I remain hopeful for our nation and for the church. So we'll keep the conversation going for sure. We'll talk about just some practical ways that we can move forward with this. And so it's not all theory, because it's upon us. It's knocking on the door. It's here now. So the harvest is ripe. Open your eyes. Yeah. So love you, man.
I love you too, man. And it always starts with just reaching one, right? Like, just to bring it back simple for people. Like, if you're just reaching one, if you're just in a relationship with one person and you're just encouraging that person and bringing truth into their life of how Jesus loves them, and
there you go,
their identity in Christ. Like, that's what Jesus told his disciples to do, was like, go and bring the kingdom and show them the truth of who they are in him.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. Well, hey, ElishasRiddle.com. Go there, check it out. We have a subscription and you can be part of our community here. We do amazing Zoom calls and we have a magazine that we put out. New one's coming out in a few weeks. So check that out. And this has been a lot of fun. So thanks, man.
All right, dude. Love you, brother.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.